Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, as a start off today, I just want to do a quick review of the powerful spring storm system that moved through parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley yesterday. On this satellite animation, we can see several moving pieces here. First of all, the deep low gave us the right kind of wind shear to kind of blow the tops of these storms off, kind of off to the east and northeast, which allowed them to remain cellular, not lining out, which is why many of them took on that rotation due to that shear in the atmosphere. A couple of other things to note. Look at how dense the fog was here along the east coast. And you can also see more dust on the backside of this cyclone. That's been a kind of a repeated factor with many of these winter storms that have gone through here late in the winter and the beginning of spring. A lot of dust being pulled out of the southern plains here. From here, I would like to just zoom in and show you what the storms look like over Mississippi and Alabama. And again, you can just see the tops of these storms really popping here deep into the stratosphere and blowing on off to the east, giving us an indication of what that shear profile looks like. You can even see the dust spreading at the very end of the animation over here toward the Texas and Louisiana border, right in through there. We put this all together. There's going to be a lot more information that comes out about this today, but so far the storm reports, we got 23 tornadoes, 75 reports of strong winds, and 43 reports of hail, 4 of which were quite large. And so as we kind of see the aftermath of the storm system today, we'll get a better handle on the true impact of it. But yesterday, just following along on Twitter, several meteorologists that I like to follow, this was a substantial event for the South, and the high risk that was issued over this area, that's pretty rare from the Storm Prediction Center, I think was well warranted. Now let's look at the impact on precip. This is just our last 3 days of total accumulated precipitation. And a couple things to take note of here. We did push more moisture into the Sierra Nevada. We do see that this brought down quite a bit more rainfall over a region that had been quite saturated from the recent systems. And the storms that were down here in the south are quite capable of putting down several inches of rainfall in total. We add this up with the 4 days before that, and this is the map that you've currently got. So this past week has been exceptionally wet in pockets here in parts of the Mid-South, the Southeast, and also back here into the Central Plains of the United States. Where we've missed out on that precipitation has been to the north, and we've got to talk about that here in just a few moments. Because our latest drought monitor, which just will get updated about 3 hours after I finish processing this video this morning, I do expect to see some changes here. And the changes I'm hoping are going to be mostly seen right in through this area. But still, we have an extensive part of the United States in drought, and this is going to continue to be an issue as we move forward into our spring. So check out the drought monitor later on this morning when it is released. Now, on radar, just to kind of see where things went overnight, here's the storms yesterday evening, and the end of this animation will tell us kind of where they were at about 3 o'clock this morning. So we were still seeing the end of this storm system now moving out of Alabama through Georgia, and it's going to head over toward parts of the southeast through the Carolinas and mid-Atlantic today. And we'll talk about what's coming on the backside in just a few moments here. But we still have out there not only a large area where there's a slight risk, but you move into this enhanced and then moderate risk right here along the North and South Carolina border. So we're going to watch for these storms again to be producing some severe weather into the day today. So I thought we'd just go right over to some high-resolution modeling to see this. Now this system is still packing quite a punch on its backside as well, and we're going to be seeing some very strong winds around it. But let's just take a quick look here, get this playing. This is going to play through about 6 a.m. this morning, and as we move forward, look at the snow that's on the backside of this in parts of Missouri. And you're going to start to see possibly some flashes of blue in through here over in parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio as we work forward in this forecast. So very windy conditions here in the eastern Corn Belt. Also potential for this to mix over a bit into some snow. But what we're trying to get first of all here is the timing of these storms as they go through the Carolinas. So you do notice there's the long frontal boundary in through here. This is actually the upper level front moving through. And so scattered storms throughout the day today, some of which could be severe. And then you notice as we get into the evening hours here, there'll be another round coming through. And on the back side, we could be bringing in some mixture of some snow right in through this area. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to take it back to the beginning, and let's just watch this play forward here. Going through the day on Thursday now, getting into the evening and overnight hours into Friday. You notice in Friday, for much of the eastern half of the country, there's a broad area of higher atmospheric pressure that settles in. We're going to wait on the next system that's coming into the west at that point. So please today just beware if you're over in this area for the potential for some of these storms to be severe. Now, the winds are something else here. This is our all hazards weather map valid early this morning here, just before about before 4 o'clock in the morning. You see that we have a lot of areas here that show up with this color representing wind advisories. And you can even see the winter weather advisory that's back here in this part of Missouri where we could see some of that snow. Now, the next system I'll talk about here in just a few moments coming into the West Coast, pretty potent as well. But take a look at this next animation. This started last night about 8 p.m. Central Time, and it's going to go through just the following 36 hours. And what it's showing you here is from our high-resolution rapid refresh model, accumulated wind gusts. And we can kind of match things up over here in our color bar. And you notice there's a lot in here in that 30 to 50 mile an hour range with a few pockets in through here where the wind gusts, and now this is not from thunderstorms here, but the wind gusts could be getting up there above that 50 mile an hour range, which is why we've issued the high wind watches out for this area. Okay, so got the near term kind of understood here. Let's now take a look at that next system coming in to the west. So the animation you're watching here is from GOES 17. You kind of pick up on two of the large systems we've been watching, right? As it starts back over, here is the one that just produced all this severe weather over the south. And our next system to be paying attention to is right here. And it's curling up quite vigorously here just off the coast, the Pacific Northwest coast. But there's more to this than what you see here on this image. And so I want to take you to a little bit different view of this. This is the wind speeds about 500 millibars today. And here is the deep low we were just talking about that will eventually cut into the mountains. But it's actually this trough right here, this more open wave that you see that will eventually be kind of the kicker to move this next system across the United States. So why don't we switch over here to the European model and see these things kind of all in action. So we start off here, 7 a.m. today, where that low is, and the frontal boundary down here to the south, still moving through Georgia and heading toward the Carolinas. We could possibly see some pretty heavy rainfall. We'll look at those totals in just a few moments. And like we said, the mix on the back side, you see the pinks in there. This is where we're going to be watching for that mixture of precip types. Here's our next system, though, okay? Let's play this forward. We've already seen through this point, so Friday evening. First low is coming here onshore in the northwest. Could get some more precip here into California and some more snow in the Sierra Nevada. Not a lot, but we're still putting moisture into California, which is good to see. We haven't shut this down entirely. High pressure settles in for much of the eastern part of the United States through the weekend. So this is now getting out there into Saturday as that low moves into the Intermountain West. And at this point, the kicker wave is now coming through the Cascade Mountains. Okay. Once we get into early next week, what I'll be watching very carefully, this is now Sunday 7 a.m., getting into the Sunday evening hours. The models continue to put this weak low pressure system just off the Carolina coast here. But we have one piece that cuts through the northern part of the Canadian prairie, and that second wave is now kind of percolating here right over the Four Corners states. Getting into early next week, we see that wave begins to emerge. So here it is. They're almost linked up. Do you see it? Right here along this frontal boundary. And this new wave, Monday afternoon and evening, starts to pull out of the plains. Now, the models have actually been quite consistent with this, and there's some important pieces to this next low pressure system. You've noticed that the last few that have gone through have either targeted the high plains or moved to the south. This one seems to be kind of ejecting from the plains and riding along that boundary, right in through there, which takes it on a more northward trajectory. So this is now 7 p.m. on Tuesday, and we're getting here into early morning hours on Wednesday. Now we'll just kind of leave it right here, but what you notice is we could be cold enough on the backside to be putting down some more snow here, and this could be hitting a region that is kind of at a critical stage with respect to drought and returning some spring moisture. I am concerned again about another chance for severe weather down here to the south midweek next week, so we still have quite a bit of things to be paying attention to here on the broad scale. Now, if we put together the whole of the next week, what's interesting about the movement of this next system is where the wettest conditions seem to be from it. And you notice that we're starting to return some of that moisture into this part of Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and that's an area that has been quite dry. You still see this is a lot from the system today. So that's what you've got right in through here in Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. And you can see the streaks down here. This is still from some of the moisture from the storms that are going through right now, and then the that went through last night, excuse me, and the next storm system that comes through. This is your next week's worth of precipitation anomalies from the European model. Now, I want to talk about soil moisture. This is modeled data, not observed, modeled data. It's moisture availability down in the top 1 meter, about 3 feet or so. And a couple things to point out. Generally, when we get up here in the 60 to 90% range, that's where things are looking pretty good. There is an area right in through here. Just see the colors that were around that 50% mark. And then you notice that area I was concerned about right inside of that little line I drew there. There are pockets in here that still do not have much in terms of moisture through the profile. Okay, certainly down here as you get into where those dust storms have originated, we've got pretty low moisture availability through the profile, and we're going to melt the snow in this area, which is going to help. That's certainly going to help in that area. But go up to the northern plains and you still see the deficits there. We can look at it another way. This is the top 100 centimeters in terms of soil moisture percentile, and now we maybe see a couple of those things I pointed out a little bit more clearly as to where the driest conditions are. But it's also easy to find here in the Mid-South where we're very saturated. So feel free to go back and pause those two maps and take a closer look. But let's see how things change here. With that next system, there is the potential for some snow in through here. And we know that we're watching here and here today. With the system coming into the west, the Cascades do pile up some snow, especially in Washington, and we do add some more to the Sierra Nevada and throughout the Intermountain West, but this isn't the same magnitude, of course, of systems as we've seen as of late. Probability of getting at least 3 inches here through the next week, just to kind of paint a stripe here across the country of where we're watching that most carefully. I like to see this. I know it's spring and many of you are done with snow, but I'm more concerned about our soil moisture profile in that area and returning water to it. Because when you look at how much water is in the snow right now, okay, big snow system, of course, from last week, or I guess that was actually earlier this week. Time is slipping away from me here. There's a lot of moisture in that, and then it's spread into this area. So that melts off. We do have, you can kind of see the numbers here, better than 1 inch of liquid in that. Now, what's important is to see this compared to a year ago. This was 2020 as of the 17th of March. Had quite a bit more snow here on the headwaters of the Mississippi and still quite a bit of snowpack that was in this part of the Dakotas. Now, of course, neither of these two maps, looking at this year and last year compared to 2019, where we had some places here, not only in the headwaters of the Mississippi, but in the Missouri River as well, where we had anywhere 6 to 9 inches of liquid equivalent on this. And of course, that was met with some incredible spring rains, which gave us the flooding events we saw in spring of 2019. All right, let's move away from looking back at snow and go to where this pattern is going to take us. We do see that the atmosphere, by the time we get up to day 10, and this is in both models, by the way, the GFS and the European, kind of building a ridge back here into just off the coast, which will give us a downstream trough. But it's the jet stream level winds I'm more interested in, because that particular pattern where the Pacific branch is doing this and the subtropical branch is doing that, I think the number one question to be asking is, will this pattern shift as we get out of March and into April, where it's been splitting here just off the west coast? Because as it comes together and through this area, it's given us a very active storm track. So if we look out there, I've got both models for you. Map I made from the GFS over here showing you above average precipitation on that pattern, and the European follows suit. Where I think I have the most confidence in this is that overall this is a drier picture for the west coast. It's just not the right setup to be bringing in those very late March rains that we can get here with the split flow. But I don't buy into this being drier in this area, and let me show you why. What I've got over here, this is, again, European. We tend to find this to be the most consistent model. The week 2 forecast that I showed you back in my March 11th video, which means it was the forecast for the 18th through the 25th. This is what it was predicting for this upcoming week, okay? This is the new week 1 forecast for the same time period. And you notice that the model was unable, and this is just a This is just a fact of life when it comes to forecasting. It was unable to really pick up on the systems that were cutting through this part of the Corn Belt and then back into the upper Midwest. And as a result, it predicted this region too dry. So the reason why I say that is if the flow continues to do this, this area would see more active moisture return than what's currently being advertised here. All right, so we're just kind of looking at model consistency. Let's flip over to a discussion on temperatures. Here's our max temperatures today, and let's kind of walk through the next week here. We'll look at high temperatures. So as we go forward, okay, on the backside of that cyclone, yeah, quite cool. And as we move the storms through here, there's still a wide open warm sector with a lot of instability in it as we get over to the Carolinas. Look at the northern plains, though. Very, very warm there. In fact, we might see warmer temperatures in Montana than we could be down here in Louisiana today. All right, let's move forward into the day tomorrow on Friday. The cooler weather settles into the east, but the pattern opens up here as high pressure moves in for the weekend. And you'll see the temperatures shift considerably here in the midsection of the country as the cold air exits to the south and east. So here's Saturday's high temperatures. We'll get our way into Sunday and now into Monday the 22nd. And as we work our way out into early next week, we see that the cooler weather is tucked away in the Intermountain West and parts of the high plains, and more broad-scale warmth starts to move over into the eastern part of the United States. And we'll finish this up here with a map on Wednesday. If we stretch this out farther, I've got over here the day 5 through 10, and both models are kind of advertising a very similar look here in terms of the temperature patterns, getting you out here to the 28th of March. And if we go beyond that, let's go all the way right into the beginning of April. Both models, again, see similarities in the east. There is discrepancy with what's happening here in the Canadian Prairie. And I'll be honest with you, the GFS, I think, has been too aggressive with returning cold to that area, whereas the Europeans had a better handle on the Canadian Prairie temperature patterns as of late. So that kind of gets us through the next couple of weeks. If you have a few more minutes, hang on, because I like to talk about some longer-term things again. What I want to do is, I got asked this the other day, so I'm going to present it, and it's primarily for the corn and soybean belt, but let's just take a look at the overall pattern. You go back and find our coldest and wettest Aprils on record, and there's a couple of common features here in the flow of the Pacific jet stream. They tend to ridge out right here in the Gulf of Alaska. And what that tends to do is if you push the jet stream up here, well, there's going to be consequentially a downstream troughing. And in these years that were our coldest Aprils, especially 2018, that troughing was really focused really between the Intermountain West and the Great Lakes. When you think about the wettest Aprils, what we tended to get was two pieces to this. So the jet stream, the northern branch did that, and there was a subtropical piece that came in like this, and they both ran over this ridge to the east. So it gave us a very active setup here, very much like what we saw in 2019. Right now, do we see either of those things happening? Well, when you get out there to mid-April, I noticed that the heights are higher here, and they're also higher there. So the jet stream pattern is going to tend to continue that split into the west, kind of bringing things together and running quickly here toward the north and east. So overall, what that gives us is a precipitation pattern that's going to look drier, but I'm going to call that into question. I put this in a briefing I gave yesterday, and I want to show you, this was a year ago, issued on March 16th, the forecast for April 2020. And what was interesting is it was keeping this area quite wet and much of the interior of the country into the Canadian Prairie drier. Now what verified is shown to you over here. That's the April 2020 county level precipitation ranks. And you can kind of blur your eyes and say, you know what, the model didn't do that half bad of a job. Well, this is what it's calling for this year. And you notice that for the month of April, if it's calling for drier conditions here along the Gulf Coast and then continuing back to the west, a lot of people would look at this and say, all right, if we return the moisture now in March and then we do that in April, this is going to be a very, very early go of it. What I'm going to tell you is I don't have the same confidence that we saw a year ago. And I think that we've overdone the dry bias into this area. So let's just watch it carefully. I'll say this thing about it, though. Right now, there are not any long-range indicators that we're going to go over to an extremely wet April here in the midsection of the United States. That's probably the best takeaway. But could we start to see more active pattern as you get over to the eastern Corn Belt into the east? I do think we could see that as we look our way through April. We can do the same thing for temperatures. This was issued on March 16th of last year for April 2020. The models had tried to keep a lot of the colder weather in the Canadian Prairie and the West. What ended up happening is it made a later shift over here to the east, and we saw cooler weather spreading into the east, whereas the models, I think, had forecasted to be a little bit farther to the west back in March. All right. Our upcoming forecast looks like this. This is for the month of April, and there are really not a lot of strong indicators to say that the models don't have this pattern, I think, locked in. Quick reminder, we're not right now forecasting the last frost. That's just, we're too far out from when that's going to occur, but we do see a milder pattern forecast through April for many across the Canadian Prairie into the United States. The cooler weather is tucked away primarily at high elevation in the west. There's some support for this. The long-range European model avoided, with the MJO taking it down here to the Indian Ocean into phases 2 and 3 and 1. And instead, the forecast is trying to chuck it out there over into phase 5 and 6. If it would have come down here into phase 3, we would have expected a cooler pattern historically based on this. But phase 5 and 6 just tend to be more relaxed, maybe a bit more on the warmer side of things if you just think about the tropical connection. And speaking of tropical connection, and this is where we're going to kind of wrap this up, I'd like to show you what this La Nina we just had looked like, okay? So this starts on July 1st last year, goes through the late summer time period, gets into fall, shows us the peak of this La Nina probably around mid-January right there. And as we've gotten into late, it's really faded. Many of us are going to watch carefully the cooler water that is in place here. And we've talked about this in recent videos about what that might mean for temperatures and precipitation in the Midwest. Cooler water here needs to be watched, and the extension of it over here toward Japan. If the water temperatures look like this in June and July, the risk for drought goes up considerably in the midsection of the country. So I just want everyone to watch it very carefully. Right now, what are the long-range models forecasting? Well, let's just take a look at some new data we got here from the IRI multi-model group. On the left, I have the precipitation forecast, and on the right, I've got the temperature forecast. And you can see that in April, May, and June, the models, which were initialized with a lot of drought in place, remember that, continue to try to give us a higher probability of being drier than normal in through these areas, also down here in the southern plains and even the Gulf Coast. Warmth, I mean, it's calling for the warm spring, but anchored here over the Four Corners states. We can stretch this out into summer. The models do still attempt to back the heat and the risk for drought farther to the west. And the question will be, will there be a ridge sitting here early that migrates to the west and sets up here for late summer, giving us those ridge-riding storms that come through the Canadian Prairie into the Midwest? Or will the models be leaving the ridges closer to the midsection of the country? That is still very much up in the air. But I want you to know that we've kind of presented here at the beginning of March the risk for some hotter, drier conditions for this summer in the midsection of the U.S. With the warmer ocean temperatures in the North Atlantic, though, and you can see the wetter conditions being forecast here for late summer, July, August, September, there's some concern about another more active than normal hurricane season, especially if the La Nina tries to make a return. And I'll finish with this, kind of a neat bit of news that came out the other day on the 17th. The WMO is going to stop using the Greek alphabet to name systems once we get past our 21 names on the name list. They've actually going to come up with a new set of names that are not Greek. And we retired in 2020, Laura, Ada, and Iota. So 2 Greek names were retired. Okay, I wanted to present a lot to you today as you go into your weekend. Keep an eye on the severe weather system to the south and know that we do have some moisture returning again next week into the midsection of the country. So we'll wrap it up there. Have a great rest of your week and weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.